Hello, hello, hello. This is Ryan here. Welcome to Survey Funnel Formula Week 1, the first training session. I'm really excited to be here. If it's your first Google Hangout, and clearly it isn't if you heard this presentation, just a few things. So first, the webinar is on a delay. So I'm going to be saying something, you're going to be hearing it on anywhere from a 30 to 60-second delay, depending on what your internet connection is. So I'll be asking for some feedback throughout the presentation, because what I really want to do is make sure that I'm going in enough detail, but I'm not covering things too slowly. So I kind of want to get a constant feel if I'm speaking too quickly, if I'm speaking too advanced, if I'm going through stuff that's just obvious and too basic, because I want to gear this basically to the kind of the level of the audience and make sure things are a right fit. So I'll be doing that. I might ask for some feedback and say we'll get back to that in a second because of the 30 to 60-second delay. So that's number one. Number two, as far as providing feedback, what I'd like for you to do is, and I'm saying, everyone's saying hi now, which is cool, because again, this is the 30-second delay. You're hearing what I said 30 seconds ago. So hello, everybody. A lot of familiar names, folks that I know, so I'm really excited to be here. The other thing is, if you haven't noticed already, there is a public chat. So if there's something that's unclear, if you have questions, if you want me to repeat something, if you want me to go into more detail on something, if I'm explaining something and you say, all right, Ryan, I get it, you can move on, don't beat the dead horse, use the public chat to do that. I've got Ian, one of the members on my team, who's helping to manage the chat. He's going to be monitoring the comments, and I've asked Ian to chime in perhaps every now and then to let me know as I ask for what the questions are, so I can continue going through the training without monitoring every single question that comes through. And that way, if you ask something, there'll be a good chance that I won't miss it. What I'll be doing as far as today's session, it's the first session, I'm just going to spend 30 seconds to go through the entire overview of what my survey funnel formula looks like and the way I approach building a survey from start to finish. And then we're going to be spending the bulk of this call on going through what I call the pre-funnel work, which is a deep dive survey analysis exercise that I go through before I work on any funnel, before I enter any new market, before I take on any new project, work in any new niche. So you're going to see me go through that exact process. And then after that, I'm going to open up the call to Q&A via the chat, and I'll take questions and answers. I blocked off about 45 to 60 minutes to go through the actual content. It may take that long, it may not, I'm not sure. And the reason why is because I've never gone through and done this actual training before. And then I've blocked off an additional 30 minutes in my schedule to account for additional Q&A. So that's going to be the rough schedule. If I finish early, that'll be more time for Q&A, and if I finish a little bit late, then there'll be a little bit less time for Q&A. Now, as far as the overall process, what you can see here is on my screen, hopefully everybody can see this, you should be able to see this, is the overall flow chart. Now, if you don't already have access to the flow chart, one other thing that I want to cover as far as how all the materials are going to be made available. We're going to be setting up a very basic membership site. This isn't going to be a fancy membership site for like a product that you might have bought. I'm literally setting up this membership site to use as my own internal training, and I'm going to be giving you password access to get in on those same files. So that's where you're going to be accessing the replay video of this presentation. I noticed a few people asked about getting access to this particular flow chart that you see in front of you right here. If you haven't yet already downloaded this flow chart, we'll put a link to the flowchart in the members area. Ian, just make a note to include that as one of the downloadable items. There are a few other items that we'll be talking about today that I'm going to be going through, some templates, basically some stuff that I do with email, some stuff that I do with the deep dive pre-funnel survey that I go through. So I'm going to make sure that you have all the templates that you need to make the process of replicating my own process and using it in your business as easy as possible. So as far as questions that people had pre-submitted to this training, some of the questions that people submitted were appropriate to today's topic, and those questions, I'm going to do my best to cover those, and if I miss something, then we'll cover that at the end. There are some other questions that people pre-submitted that are great questions about the overall process, but they aren't necessarily things that apply to what we're going to be talking about today. So I'll be covering that in an upcoming training. Lastly, if there's any questions that we don't get to on this time for today's topic, what I'm going to do is we'll take a little bit of time on the next call to answer those questions, and we'll kind of go through that process. So that way, after I know the way it works, sometimes you hear someone teach something and you need to go through it either another time, or you need to review your notes, and then questions come up. So I'm going to leave the opportunity to ask questions about what we cover in this session on next week's session as well. So that's just wanted to lay out a little bit of the groundwork for what to expect over the next couple weeks, what we're going to be going through. Again, I want this to be interactive. I want to gear the training to what your questions are. I might not be able to answer every specific individual question, because I know everybody, what they want to know is, how do I apply this to my very specific set of circumstances in my market? And there are probably too many people that are going to be on the calls to cover everybody's individual session. What I'm going to try to talk about is how you can apply this to different broad scenarios that tend to come up over and over again. So specifically today, we're going to be covering what I call the pre-funnel deep dive survey work, and I'm just going to go through my exact process for doing this. You can see how I approach building a funnel. You can kind of get inside my own head. You can kind of understand when I tackle something, what my thought process is like. We're going to be going through the process where I figure out what buckets to come up with as far as the bucket survey is concerned, how I come up with and determine what the main objections are in the market, how I figure out how to appeal and speak to the different subgroups or submarkets in any given market, how I identify what the hot buttons are, how I prioritize those, how I focus on the prospects in a market that are most likely to buy and ignore everybody else, something that we call hyper-responsive prospects or hyper-responsive customers. The reasons why I ask all the questions that I ask, and the reasons why I put them in the order that they're in. I'm going to talk about how to do this sort of deep dive analysis if you have an existing list that you have access to, whether it's for your own business or you're doing this for a client and you're doing a deep dive analysis for their business. I'm also going to show you how to do the same type of analysis if you don't have an existing list, and how you build up a list of people and build up a database of information if you're going into a new market, going into a new niche, approaching a new product or new venture that you have no existing audience in. So broadly speaking, the next 6 weeks, we're going to be doing, like I said, pre-funnel work today, week 1. Then we're going to be getting into the micro commitment and segmentation survey, the bucket survey, next week in week 2. I'm going to walk you through how I create that and how I set that up. Then we're going to get back to this blue square right here in week 3, creating the actual landing page, what the landing page needs to look like, the elements that need to be on it, the video, scripting out the video that entices people to fill out the survey, because a key part of this process is the way in which you position the survey. If you don't position the survey right, nobody's going to take it in the first place. We're going to talk about that. Then in week 4, we're going to be talking about the same visit sale. This is where you're trying to get people to take out their wallet, take out their credit card, and buy something that same day. I'm going to go through the whole process that I put together for coming up with the same visit sale offer. Then in week 5, we're going to go through my profit maximization path, and I have a couple best practices that I like to use, go-to structures, go-to formulas, go-to price points when it comes to building out a one-click upsell sequence. So I'm going to teach you what I do there. And then in week 6, we're going to cover the autoresponder sequences, the buyer sequence and the non-buyer sequence, and how you can get more people to end up purchasing. And in some cases, you can actually double the number of people who purchase relative to what you're doing on a same visit sale. You can literally 2x the number of buyers simply by putting in place a really solid prospect autoresponder sequence, and we're going to be covering that in week 6. So that is the overview. Ian, are there any burning questions that we should address now before I actually dive into the pre-funnel deep dive survey work that we're going to be covering this week?
It doesn't look like it. It looks like people are very excited to get started.
Cool. All right, let's do it. So I've got a 3 monitor setup right now. So what I've got a whole bunch of open windows right now that I'm going to be moving to the one monitor that I'm displaying as part of the training. So just bear in mind, there isn't a PowerPoint presentation or anything like that. I'm actually going to be taking you through the live, the software that I use, all the tools that I use to build things. I'm going to be showing you a live example. So for the purposes of this training, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be walking through the creation of a real live funnel that you're going to see eventually used. And the funnel that I'm going to be demonstrating my process on is a funnel that I've yet to create, that I've wanted to create for a very long time, which is the funnel for my own consulting and coaching business. Specifically, I'm going to be building out a survey funnel to funnel my own prospects into one of several directions geared toward connecting them with the best product or service in my own product catalog, and most specifically, funnel people into either an info product direction, so in other words, prospects that are a best fit match for my information product, which is the product, one of which is the product that you purchased, this survey funnel formula training. The second direction is my coaching practice, which is currently booked up at the moment, but building up that wait list. And thirdly is my coaching plus implementation programs, whereby I build out the type of funnel that I'm going to be teaching you. My team and I build that out on behalf of clients. So broadly speaking, you're going to see my thought process for creating my own funnel. And what's exciting is because I'm doing this live, I don't know exactly how this is going to play out. I don't know exactly what the buckets are. I don't know exactly what the languaging that I'm going to be using, the scripting that I'm going to be using. And the reason why is because up until this point, as far as funneling prospects into my own private consulting practice and coaching practice and implementation practice, 100% of the business has come through referrals. So I haven't had a need to build a funnel, and it's interesting because it's a classic case of the cobbler's son having no shoes. I build survey funnels all day, every day, but I haven't had a need to build one in my own practice, and now I've had a desire to build one for a very long time, and so I'm going to be showing you that process real time. Okay, so enough rambling and preambling here. Let's talk about what the first step is. So the biggest mistake that people tend to make when they approach the survey funnel process is they love the idea of, yes, if I funnel people through a survey, I can figure out who they are, I can figure out what they want, and with that information, I can send them to one of several pages. And those pages could be different products that I sell, different services that I offer, or it could be the same product positioned 3, 4, 5 different ways based on the answers that someone provides to a survey. Conceptually, that's great. One of the biggest mistakes that people make going into that process is they assume they know what the buckets should be. They go in, especially if it's a market that they've been in for a very long time, and I see this with the clients that I work with all the time, they'll tell me, we know our clients. We know who our customers are. And if it's a new market, then there's a lot of guesswork involved. And that is a straight line to a path of failure if you go into this process assuming you know what the buckets are. So the question is, what's the antidote? What do you do to remedy that? Well, that's what I'm going to be walking you through today. As you've probably guessed and you've probably noticed by now, my process is all about leaving as little to chance and guesswork as possible, and basically having our audience give us the answers to the test, giving us answers to the questions that we want to ask. So the way that you do that, the way that you figure out what the buckets are, is by asking a certain set of questions to your audience. So let's take the first scenario as an example first, and I'm going to walk you through that. So if you have an existing audience, an existing list that you can survey, I'm going to walk you through the process of that. We're going to talk about, if you don't have any list at all, what to do in a moment. But in my case, I have a relatively small, it's a few thousand people, internet marketing list folks that are entrepreneurs. They're looking to build businesses online. I don't have a very large list because this isn't my main business, and like I said, I haven't really invested a lot of time in building out that list. I'm someone who helps a small number of people in a big way rather than a large number of people in a big way, a large number of people in a small way, because I cater to high-level 7, 8, and 9-figure clients. But what I did for the purposes of this training program is I sent an email out, and probably you saw it, and I'm going to be moving this email to this page here. And what I'm going to just ask for your help, Ian, is, because I know this is going to be small for some people, I'm going to try to increase the size, and I don't know if I can zoom in Dreamweaver here. Plus, 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 cool. That's kind of annoying. Let's do it like this. Okay. You're just looking at, if you're not familiar with Dreamweaver, this is just a simple code editor. This is Adobe's product. You don't need this. But basically what I'm going to be showing you is the email that I sent to my list to solicit them to take the survey. So, and by the way, everybody will be getting access to this email. I'm going to upload it as a template so you can basically use it as a starting point if you want to query and survey your own list. So basically, without reading this verbatim, because you can do that later, is the way I position things is I wrote to my list and I said, hey, over the next coming weeks, I'd like to do something a little bit different, and rather than just write what's on the top of my mind, which is typically what I do in my marketing list, is I write about whatever's going on with the client work that I'm doing or whatever marketing thoughts that I have and kind of just share those thoughts with the audience. I thought it would be fun, and this is the way I've positioned things, I thought it would be fun to ask people what they wanted to learn about. And the way I framed that was, if you could take just 5 minutes and tell me what is the single most biggest challenge that you're struggling with in your business right now. If you could take 30 seconds to tell me what that is, A, it would mean the world to me, and B, most importantly, with that information, I will use that information to gear the upcoming emails and specifically write about the topics that you want to know more about. Okay? Now this is important. I want to talk about this just for a brief second, because one of the questions that I get from a lot of people, and I noticed this in the pre-questions, was what incentives should you offer people when it comes to filling out a survey? Well, the answer is you should not offer any sort of incentive beyond the result that they are looking to get. And I'll say that again. You should not offer any incentive like an iPad, like a free cruise, like an Amazon gift card. You don't want to offer anything like that. What you want to offer is the results that you've promised. So in this case, it's you're going to get more tailored information to you. That's the prize. And the reason why you want to do that, instead of offering some sort of Amazon gift card or something along those lines, is your data is going to be tainted. Your data is going to be biased. The data is going to be biased towards people who just want that free thing, and they're not going to be representative. The data is not going to be representative of whether or not they are a hyper-responsive prospect. And that's what we're looking for, as you're going to see in a moment as I go through the analysis process. So basically, you do not want to offer any sort of incentive. The incentive, for example, say you're launching a new product. This is another mechanism that you can use. If you're thinking about launching a new product, what you would say is, I'm thinking about launching some new training. We're putting the finishing touches on that training, but before we finish, what I'd like to know is, tell me, what's the single biggest question that you have about XYZ product, or what's the single biggest challenge that you're having around XYZ topic? If you take a moment to do that, not only will I tailor the information in the programs, so you'll be getting more custom information that's geared towards you, but on top of that, and this is the other mechanism that you can use to incentivize people to fill out the survey, is I'll offer you a 20, 30, 40, whatever the number you want it to be is, 40% discount off the cost of the training as soon as it's available. Now, you might be asking yourself, what's the difference between offering a discount on the training versus offering an Amazon gift card? Well, it's a big difference, because they only get that discount if they buy the thing. Why does that matter? The discount's only going to be motivating to them if they're actually interested in investing in that program. And therefore, when you look at their answer, you know that they're motivated enough. If they're motivated enough to provide you their information, that means that there's a good chance that they would be motivated enough to buy the product. If you're offering the iPad, people might just want the iPad and they couldn't give a crap about what it is that you're selling or the topic of your training. They might be doing it just for the iPad. So those are a few basic examples right there. Now, the question I know that some people might have is, well, what if I don't have a list? How do I do this? You know, there are a couple different ways you can do it. I'm going to show you the way that I do it. Okay. 1 second here. Pull up this. Okay. So what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be showing you a template for a website that I built. This website no longer exists, but I'm going to explain what the purpose of it is and how you can leverage this. Let me zoom in here for a moment. Okay, that's a little too much. Let's do it like that. And I am going to hide this. Okay, so before I launched my business, Rocket Memory, in the memory improvement space, it was a market that I had a lot of experience in because I taught neuroscience at the Ivy League level, and I studied neuroscience at the Ivy League level. And one of the things that I taught in my sections was a series of memory techniques to memorize the vast amount of information that my students were expected to learn as part of their course. And so I had experience teaching people, but what I didn't have experiences in was helping the general population. I had helped, you know, Ivy League college students. I hadn't helped people who are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, returning students, and people who wanted to remember other things. So before I launched that business, Rocket Memory, I built out a research site. And the research site was purely designed to get people to give me information about themselves. So what I did was I used, this was a template for the landing page that I would run. And although you don't see the language on this, basically the angle that I offered was, you know, if I was advertising on a keyword like improve memory, it was discover how to improve your memory quickly and easily, something like that. And it was, the whole angle was, discover everything you need to improve your memory quickly and easily. Get this free memory improvement quick start kit. All you need to do is click on the link below, tell me about your situation, and I'll customize the kit with information geared towards you and your situation. So this was the landing page that people were directed to. And when they clicked on this red button here, and the reason why I'm doing this in Photoshop, again, is because this site is no longer in existence, so I can't demonstrate it online, but you'll get the sort of same effect. When they clicked on this red button here in the Photoshop file, a form popped up. The form basically looked like this. I asked for name, email, their age, gender. I asked for what I thought might be interesting submarkets to target. And then here's the important part, this part down here. I asked an open-ended question. I said, what's your single most important question about memory improvement? And secondly, and what prompted you to search for the answer today in particular? Now, the reason why you asked those two questions are as follows. The first part of the question, what's the single most important question about memory improvement, or whatever your topic might be, that's where you find out the reason why they're searching for whatever it is that you offer. Now, this is very straightforward if you're selling information or for business advice or a software product. It's a little bit less straightforward if you're selling a physical product, but the same approach applies. The first part of the question is asking, what are they searching for? The second part of the question, and what prompted you to search for the answer today in particular, that gives you the context for the search. So I'll give you an example. In this business, I'd often see people saying, I'm looking to improve, the reason why I'm searching for memory improvement information is because, or I'm looking to improve my memory for, things like, remembering facts and figures and dates and paragraphs of information. Fine. The reason why, and the second part of the question, the reason why I searched today in particular is because I've recently decided to go into the ministry, and I really want to memorize Bible scripture so I can speak more with more credibility and more authenticity when I'm preaching my sermons. Whoa! That context provides so much backdrop for the first part of the question. Now you'll notice that there's a little checkbox here where I give people the option to say, check, I'm having a hard time finding the information I'm looking for. The reason why I asked that question is it's an indicator of hyper-responsivity. If someone enters their an open-ended response and they check off a little box saying, I'm having a hard time finding the information that I'm looking for, the extra step that they take to check off that box tells you you should pay closer attention to that response than to someone who doesn't check that box off. The same sort of principle applies on this last question, which is, finally, I may wish to follow up with a few people personally over the telephone. Would you be open to discussing with me further on the condition that I promise not to try to sell you anything? If so, would you kindly leave your phone number below? Getting the person's phone number is important, as we're going to discuss in a moment, because it's important to follow up with some folks on the telephone, which gives you a deeper understanding of your market, what their hot buttons are, what the objections are. But the simple act of someone entering their phone number in a form like this, whether the form looks like this or it looks like the survey that we're about to go through in a moment, that is an indicator of hyper-responsivity, hyper-responsiveness. So if someone is willing to give you their phone number, do you think they're more or less likely to buy something if you have a solution, a product around that particular situation? The answer is they're more likely to buy. And that's the reason why we ask for their phone number. And I'm going to walk you through the formula that I use to analyze hyper-responsiveness in a moment. Now, before we go any further, I'm a big believer in giving credit where credit's due. I think if any time that you listen to someone, it's important to understand where they came up with the methodologies that they use, because none of us, everyone on this call, myself included, invented everything that we do. There are parts to what I do that I'm the only one on the planet who does it this way. But there are other parts that I've leveraged, I think, the best of the best from some other really smart marketers, some other really smart business people that I've learned from over the years. And in this case, this process here is an outgrowth of the work that I did with Dr. Glenn Livingston, who taught me a lot about the importance of doing these deep dive research surveys whenever you enter a new market. He was successful going into 17 different markets, one right after the other. I used his process to successfully enter 3 different markets, all of which became mid to high 6-figure businesses. And I did that largely using this process here. So I want people to recognize, if you've been a student of Dr. Glenn Livingston's, that he had a tremendous amount of impact on my own thinking in this particular area, and he definitely deserves credit for that. So this is the process that you go through if you do not have a list to access the deep dive research information. Okay? Now let's go back to that first example, that if you do have a list to access the information, what does that survey look like? So you can see here we've got a link that says, click here to tell me about your situation. Well, what happens next? Well, we're going to be sending people to a survey that looks like this. Okay? This survey here is in test mode, but if anybody took this survey, because I sent this to everybody who's on this call, then this is going to be familiar to you. If it's not, if you haven't taken it, no harm, no foul. I'm just going to walk through briefly the reason why it's structured the way it's structured. I'm just going to take a sip of water here, just a moment. Okay. So you'll notice here I've got a very basic title, and I've got the question structure. Now, you might be wondering, what's the reason for this piece here? Well, one of the things that I do when I'm running these surveys is, you'll see this in a moment, I like to code my surveys based on the source of where these people are coming from. So that SSF, the SMIQ, this is just a template. This isn't an actual survey that I use, but it's the template that I built for all the surveys that I ran to the various segments of my list to get this data. So I have a 3-letter code, SSF, that stands for the particular project, survey funnel formula. And this is a 4-letter code that stands for the list that people came from. So you'll see that in a moment. One of the codes is SSFC, which is survey. It should be SFFC, but I wrote it SSFC. It's Survey Funnel Formula Customers. I have another code that's CWLT, which is Coaching Waitlist. And it doesn't really matter what you come up with. The important thing is to have a coding system in your survey so that you know where these people are coming from, so you have a little bit of context behind the answers that they give you. So for example, if you sell multiple products, you might have multiple buyers lists. You want to be able to separate those buyers into different buckets so you can analyze, okay, the buyers of this product said one thing, but the buyers of this other product said another thing, because you want to be able to separate out that data. So very briefly, the reason why I start with this question here is because this is the single most important data point that I want to get. So if someone goes through the process or starts the process of filling out a survey, but they don't complete the process, at a bare minimum, I want them to fill out this answer. That's it. Now, there are 2 different types of survey tools that I tend to use when I do these. One of them is Survey Gizmo, which is what you're looking at here. Survey Gizmo is a paid product. It costs, gosh, I don't know, 20 bucks a month, something like that. There are no long-term contracts with it, so it's the type of thing that if you're just going to do one survey, like if you wanted to follow along live with this training and go through the same process that I go through in real time with me, you could literally sign up, I think, for a Survey Gizmo free trial for a month, run your survey, cancel the account. It's not going to cost you anything. Or you want to get an account for a month, it's going to cost you 20 bucks, so it's relatively low cost. That being said, if you want an absolute free option, the other tool that I use is Google Forms. Google Forms is a piece of Google Drive. It's 100% free. You can build basic forms, and with those forms, you can make them multi-step, you can make them single-step, and you can use the forms to do this deep dive survey gathering. And if people are interested, and I can dig up one of my sites and find an example of what a Google form looks like a little bit later on in the Q&A part. So that's the reason why I asked this question first. Then let's just put some test data in here.
Ryan, sorry, real quick, Ryan. People want to see a bigger version of this on the screen.
Oh, okay.
Zoom in a little bit.
All right. Sure. Let's see. Okay. So this is the first page. And what I'll do, by the way, is I will leave this, Ian, make a note. Let's leave this, a link to this survey in the members area so people can go back and can go through the survey again and just pay attention to it. And I'll leave it as a test one, so if you want to submit test data, it's not going to taint my real data. Let's see. So I'm just click next. Okay. Now, what I'm starting with next is the lowest threshold question. So this goes back to the thing that we talked about on the webinar, where I'm a big fan of using what I call micro commitments, where you're asking people to take the least threatening step first in the process of going through a survey, and the most threatening step last. In this case, the least threatening step would be, are you A or are you B? Okay. So in many markets that I'm in, that might be, are you a man or a woman, if gender has some sort of relevance in the information that I'm going to be providing to them. In this case, gender didn't really matter. So I started with a single, are you A or are you B question. And I really wanted to know, are people are they a full-time entrepreneur? Is their internet business their full-time income? Or are they, do they have a separate day job? What I'm going to do, Ian, because I think this might be helpful, is I'm going to put that link in the chat. I think
Awesome.
Richard put a link in the chat, but what I'd prefer people to do is use the SMIQ one if you're going to submit test data. The only reason why is because the other one will actually populate real data, and I'm going to have to go back and delete it if you just submit test data. Okay, so you can submit my internet business is my full-time income. Next, which of the following best describes you? This is the reason for this question is I'm fishing for buckets. I'm trying to figure out what I guess the buckets might be. Okay, So I'm using the open-ended one to tell me what the buckets are going to be, and I'm going to show you how I go through that because it's a relatively advanced technique which is going to set you apart from your competition, which is very exciting because almost nobody does this. But this is the point in the survey where I kind of have a feeling that I know my audience, and I want to just test my gut. And what's interesting is I'm going to show you the results of this, and you're going to see how wrong my gut was in this case. So let's just click on one of these. And I also asked this open-ended one because I wanted to see, am I missing the mark? So these are the buckets that I think are kind of most important, but am I missing the mark here? And that's where people have the option to write in. So next. Then I want the size of the business. The reason why I want to know the size of the business is in the funnel that I'm intending to build, this is a very relevant thing for me because when I do a full funnel build out, a business that's making less than $100,000 a year is not going to be a good candidate because they just don't have the money to invest, and it just doesn't make sense to pay me $50,000 to build a funnel because they're not going to get the immediate ROI on something like that. But a business that's larger will. So I want to get a sense for where the breakdown of what my market looks like. So I'll just click on this. Okay, primary niche or market. The reason why I want to know this is because when I am talking about case studies in my marketing, I want to make those case studies as relevant as possible. And this is something that virtually anybody on the call can apply to their business. You know, if you're throwing in a for instance, right? You know, for instance, let's say you are a fill in the blank. Let's say you're operating in the health space. Let's say you're operating in the weight loss space. Let's say you are a local marketing agency and you work with local brick and mortar businesses. You don't want to leave that for instance to chance. You want that for instance to be based on who your market is. Now you're not going to be able to speak to everybody, but when you ask a question like this, you can 80-20 it. You can figure out where's the 80% of my market? What niches are they in? What markets are they in? What is their situation like? So that's the reason for this question. Just put in test data. Okay. Now, lastly, you can see here, I may want to follow up with a few people personally to learn about your situation. If you'd be open to chatting for a few minutes on the condition that I promise not to sell you anything, you'll notice here's that language again, just like you saw on that landing page. On the condition that I promise not to sell you something, please leave your name and email below, and if you'd like to get a shout out when I write about your topic, blah, 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 thanks so much. Name, email, phone number. So this is important for a couple different reasons. Number one, in my case, because I'm doing a deep dive analysis, and you might want to do the same thing, I want to know a little bit about who my market is, and with a person's name and email address, you can do a little bit of Googling. You can Google, you can learn a little bit about what their website is like, you can Google their name, and you can look up what projects they're involved in. You might even be able to find their LinkedIn profile, their Facebook profile, and all this is useful information when you're doing this sort of deep dive analysis. By the end of this process, I want to become so familiar with my market that I know where they hang out on the weekend, what they smell like, what they're watching for TV, what they watch on TV on a Friday night. I want to know the book that's on their bedside nightstand. I want to know the car that they drive. I want to know all of these things, and all of this gives you that complete view, so that when you're writing, you can throw in all these little elements in your copy that are so hyper relevant to the prospect that when you're talking about TV shows, the TV shows that you mention in your copy resonate with them. You know, for example, if you've been following my list for any extended period of time, then the fact that I wrote about the TV show House of Cards is no coincidence, right? I know my market watches that show. And so when people wrote into me and said, in droves, in huge numbers, saying, "Oh my God, this is like my favorite show this year. I can't put it down. I love the show too." I had people who said, "I was thinking about writing about House of Cards in my own email marketing because I extracted marketing lessons from it as well." Well, none of that's chance. That's all based on feedback. And so the net result, when you do everything that we're talking about here, is it gives you almost like the psychic insight into who your prospects are, to the point that when you write all your copy, all your email marketing, all your video sales letters, it basically generates this response in your market where your prospect says, "Oh my God, it's like you can read my mind." This is the survey. I'm just looking very briefly. at some of the questions before I move on to the next topic. Okay, about phone questions, we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, do the question use if logic? In this case, the answer is no. Everybody sees the same set of questions. You can do if-then logic. It's a little bit more advanced. In most cases, it's overkill. Let's see. Why Survey Gizmo rather than Survey Monkey? It's a personal preference thing. If you are familiar with Survey Monkey already, it's a perfect product. It's a fine product. I just am more familiar with Survey Gizmo, and so I'm a big fan of taking the path to least resistance. So don't feel like you need to use the exact tools that I use to achieve this. Once you understand the principles, there are multiple tools that you can use to achieve it. You want to use whatever is most comfortable for you. If you're more comfortable coding up a site in Joomla, don't feel like you need to learn WordPress, and vice versa. What other questions? Zoomed in, already have done that. Yep, the email that I sent out to the group asking what folks would like to cover on this particular call, that was a link to a Google survey. It was a one-question Google survey. As far as the number of questions that you want to ask, I want to give you another reason why I like Survey Gizmo versus Google Forms. I can't remember if I mentioned this already. I wanted to mention it, and that's this. With Google Forms, the drawback to Google Forms, and the reason why, in my opinion, it's worth throwing down $20 to get a Survey Gizmo account for a month. With Google Forms, if someone completes 9 out of 10 questions but does not hit the submit button at the end, you don't get that data submitted. With Survey Gizmo, when you do what I do and what I recommend, which is break the survey up into individual pages, just like we did right here, where every question essentially, except for this last one, is a single page. Every time they click the next button, that survey data is captured. So if someone gets interrupted halfway through, if they decide halfway through, I don't feel like answering the rest of the questions, at a minimum, you've captured whatever data they've submitted up until that point. So that's yet another reason why I like Survey Gizmo over the free version. Let's see. Could you share the pop-up survey as a template, as an example? That is a different survey. I think you're referring to the bucket survey, Yulia, which is something that we'll be talking about in week 2. Specific questions include the downloads. Context research, you give the questions can you say them slower, or better yet repeat so we can get them written down. Give us questions to ask. Cool. Cool. I might have missed some because there's some further down, but I just want to go through. As far as in-depth training on the actual mechanics, if we have time at the end, I'll go back and do that. What I really want to spend time doing, though, is walking you through the actual survey analysis process, because that's the most complicated thing, and that's the where you're going to make your money. That's where the real value is. There are plenty of tutorials online, free tutorials for setting up a Google form. I'd rather focus on the stuff that literally nobody else in the world is able to speak to. You won't be able to find that stuff on Google. And what I want to focus on now is how to analyze this survey data that comes through. So what I'm going to show you now is after you run the survey, you can go into Survey Gizmo, and let me see if I can show you my Survey Gizmo screen. Okay. You go into Survey Gizmo, and you're going to have a screen that looks like this. Now this is, I know, a little bit small. Let's see if I can make it a little bit bigger for you guys. All right, it's about as big as I can make it. Let's see. You're going to have a screen that looks like this. These are going to be your responses, and you're going to have the ability to run the report and download the data. So you're just going to auto-run the report. It's going to give you the option to download the data. When you click Export Data, you can click this link here, CSV Excel, and it'll just download the data. And the way the data is going to look when you download it, it's going to be a big, hot mess. And it's going to look like, it's going to look like this. And I'll make this bigger for you as well. It's going to look like this. Make this bigger. 1 second. Okay. Let's see. Okay, it's pretty much as big as I can make it. I'm going to give you guys a template. I'm going to give you guys in the members area what this looks like. Basically, this is a big mess of data, most of which we don't really care about. There's a whole bunch of stuff like the time they started the survey, if it was a completed survey, if it was partial. You can pass comments through the language. It's all going to be in English in our case. The refer, I'm not exactly sure what that is. The session ID, you can look at what browser they're using. There's some stuff that's slightly more useful. It'll pass through the information of their IP address and their country and their city, their zip code. All that stuff really isn't that important. What we're really going to be caring about is this stuff here at the end, okay? And I'm going to explain. We're going to do this cooking show style, and I'm going to explain how I'm going to show you how I transform this data into something that's actually useful to actually use to design your funnel. So we've got the question here, the single biggest marketing challenge question. We've got the day job, full-time job. We've got their profession, if they're a business owner who sells affiliate products, a consultant. This column here is for the folks that said they're something completely different. The other on that question, that tells me what they are here, tells me the size of their business, their primary niche. And at the end here, you're going to get 3 more columns: name, email, and phone number. For the purposes of this demonstration, I've hidden people's private contact information just out of respect, but know that you would get that information here. So this is what the data looks like in raw form. Not very useful. I'm going to teach you exactly what to do with it. This is the trickiest thing. Okay. I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to show you. Okay. All right. Let's make this a little bigger for you guys. Okay. And I am going to. So this is what it used to look like. I'll just put it like this. This is what it looks like now. And I'm going to explain everything that I've done, and I'm going to give you this template so you can copy my exact process. So this, in part, is an outgrowth of some of the work that I did one-on-one with Dr. Glenn Livingston when I worked as a coach under him for 2 years and basically learned his methods inside and out. And some of this is my own methodology added to that. So the first thing that I like to do is I add a column at the front, and I call it Survey ID. Now, the reason why I do that is because if you look, and I'm going to show you my Survey Gizmo dashboard here. If you look at my Survey Gizmo account right here, you're going to notice that I have, let's see, a number of different surveys that are basically all the same thing, and I have a few responses for each one. I sent this survey out to roughly about 1,000 people, 1,300 people, somewhere in that neighborhood, and I got about, I think, 131 total responses and 112 solid responses. So there were about 20 garbage responses in there where people just put in, you know, one letter, or these were people who were probably just looking to see how my process works and just wanted to click through it. A few test results that I had submitted, a few duplicates where people, you know, hit the submit button twice. So the net results that I had, I think, were 112 people, sending out to about between 1,000 and 1,300 people. But you'll notice here that each individual survey only has 11, 7, 3, 30, 60, 4, 7. Well, the reason for that is because each of these surveys, I've run a duplicate of the survey to a different list in or sublist in my, in this case, Aweber account. So I have different products that I've sold in the past. I have, you know, just to give you like a few examples, this one here, SSFC. I don't know why I did that. It should be SFFC, but it's Survey Funnel Formula Customers. So 60 people who purchased this course ended up filling out the survey, which is interesting because it's actually just a fraction of the number of people who signed up for the course. And this is S Survey Funnel Formula Interested. So these are people who who were interested in the course but ended up not buying. This is people here who have signed up for my coaching waitlist. I think we've got about 60 people now that are on the waitlist, somewhere in that neighborhood. So 11 of those people signed up. And there is obviously some overlap. There's some people who have bought this product who are also on my coaching list. So there's a little bit of overlap. But the reason why I did that, and the reason why you want to do the same thing, is it's important to understand the context behind someone's answer. So, I've sold, like in this case here, I only had 4 people who bought VSL Fast Track back in 2011 or 2012 when we sold that program, who signed up for the survey, which is interesting, but at the same time not surprising, because it's been a long time since that audience has purchased something from me. So the survey uptake rate is going to be a lot lower than you might expect in cases where people have bought something more recently from you. So anyways, you have the different surveys. You export them in this format, like you see here, the big messy format. Then you literally add them all together. So you export one, you copy the list of people, you add it. So you're basically you're faced with one very long list of responses, which is what you have here. And then you tag the people, as they come in. You add a column every time that you export one of these surveys. At the front of the column, you add their survey ID. So if we were to just sort this by survey ID, just to illustrate the point, you can see I've got all the coaching waitlist people, I've got all the funnel specialist people, all the marketing interest people, I've got all the SSFI people, SFFC people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can organize them, sort them by that. I'm going to explain how this particular list of survey responses is organized in a moment. I like to shorten my titles up here, and you'll get this template, but I like to just keep my data nice and organized. So SMIQ is single most important question, and I have kind of shorthand names for all of these. So full or part-time, type is basically their profession, revenue, I've changed things from kind of this big, messy special character situation here, where it's giving me the HTML text for the greater than symbol. It's kind of a real mess. And basically what I did, I just put the highest revenue number within the range. So someone who is specified that their business was under $100,000, the revenue number is 100,000, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, this is where things start to get interesting. So again, I've hidden people's names, email, and phone numbers just to respect everybody's privacy. But what I've done is I use a simple little formula, and it's right here. I can't make this formula bar any bigger. I know it's infinitesimally small to you, and you're not going to be able to read it. You will have this template in the members area, but basically what I'm doing is it's a simple little formula that basically checks if the email address, or the name in this case, is anything other than blank. If it's not blank, so if they left a name, then it spits out a 1. And I do the same thing for name, email, and phone number. Okay. Now this next column here is a new column. This column here, this is where things kind of really start to get interesting. This is where I use a formula called length, and this formula calculates the number of characters in this open-ended response. It tells me how long the person's response is. Why is that important? It's important because remember at the beginning we talked about hyper responsiveness. Well, the longer a person's response is, the longer their answer is in an open-ended survey, the more likely they are to be a buyer of whatever it is that you're selling. Because if you think about it like this, if you're selling a medical device that improves back pain, if a doctor asks, or a business owner asks, what's the single biggest challenge you're having with back pain right now? And if someone writes, my back hurts, or if someone writes, 5 years ago, I got into a car accident. It was a head-on collision. I had to go through physical therapy for 6 months. I went through 3 different forms of back pain medication. I was even on morphine for a period of time. I've been out of work for the last 2.5 years. I can't hold down a stable job, and it's all because I can't sit down in an office chair. And I've been trying to find a solution for the last 5 years, and I'm desperate to find anything that works. Which of those 2 responses is more likely to purchase a product if you have a solution that solves their problem? It's the second one. And so that's the reason why we want to know response length and why it's so important. This column here that you see is MLUT, just stands for multiplier. So one of the things that I'll do is if someone leaves their phone number, in this case, in this survey, this little formula here checks, is this phone number field greater than 0, and if so, enter 1.5, And what I do is multiply that 1.5 to the length of the response here to give a score. And the reason why I do that is because someone leaving their phone number is sort of like a force multiplier. If someone gives a response and leaves their phone number, the phone number is sort of like an indicator that they're even more hyper responsive than their text answer would indicate. So by nature of someone leaving their phone number, you want to weight their response higher than if someone didn't leave their phone number. And that's the reason why we use 1.5. Why 1.5 and why not 1.8? To be perfectly honest, it's somewhat arbitrary. But what I want to do is I want to weight those responses more highly than folks that don't leave their phone number at all. So then at the end, you're left with a score. Again, you'll have this template, so you'll be able to copy exactly what I do. But you're left with this score. Now, the score is, what I do is I basically rank all the responses according to the score. And what you're left with is the list of responses in order of most hyper-responsive through least hyper-responsive. And what I'm predominantly interested in is the top 20%, and to a lesser extent, the 20% below that. Now, when you look at these scores, I will tell you this, because I've done this in literally dozens of different markets. The scores that you're seeing here are extremely high. You typically will not see response lengths like I'm seeing here. And there's a reason for that. Number one, it has to do with my positioning in the marketplace. People really do want to get on the phone with me. They want to ask me questions just because of my own positioning. This is going out to a warm audience. These are people who know me. Typically, they're customers who have bought products from me before. And also, this is I'm teaching a product around using surveys. So people, by nature, are going to be more amenable to answering surveys in detail. You're not going to see the kind of numbers that I'm showing you, most likely, in your market. But anything over a score of 400 is a good indicator that you've got a segment of your market that's hyper-responsive. Now, so where do you go from here? Well, before I get into how I analyze the open-ended responses, I want to show you how I analyze the demographic information that we looked at. So I really wanted to know all these little things that we looked at. So what percentage of people were full-time versus part-time? What percentage of people were business owners who sell their own product versus affiliate product? What about the revenue breakdown of my customers? All that sort of thing. So what I did is, and you'll have access to this template, and I will say that this course is not a course on how to use Excel. So if you're a complete newbie when it comes to Excel, there are resources out there where you can get help. You can, there are forums out there. There are actually websites out there where you can submit Excel questions. So if you're a complete newbie when it comes to using Excel, then I would recommend one of those resources, because we will not have the time to go into the very basics of Excel. I will give you this template so that you can use it as a starting point, and if you're very skilled in Excel, then this is all relatively straightforward work. So what I'm always looking for is, what's the 80-20? Okay, where's the 80% of my market located in each of these segments? And the reason why I want to know that is I want to know that if I'm only going to focus on one segment of my market, who is it going to be? Who is my bullseye customer? Who is most likely to be at the center of what it is that I'm selling? So what I've done is I've looked at each of the kind of main parameters, and I looked at, okay, what percentage of people are doing their internet business as their full-time income versus having a day job as well. The split is 70-30. When I look at the different buckets, I've got a couple things that are interesting and one thing that's a little bit concerning. So if I look at this, 45% of my market are business owners who sell their own product. I'll tell you what some of the surprises are. This one here is a surprise to me. The number of business owners that only sell or predominantly sell affiliate products was a lot smaller than what I would have expected. So I would chalk that up in the category of Ryan's gut was wrong on something that he thought he knew. And that's the reason why we ask questions like this, to verify, to validate our thinking, or to refute our thinking, because we want the numbers to dictate our decision making. Employee, no surprise here. I knew a small percentage of people were employees. I didn't really know how small. I was also surprised with people who self-describe themselves as copywriters. only 2.7%. The two big buckets in my business, as far as my customers, are business owners and consultants. And I would lump copywriters into consultants. And these are business owners who sell their own product specifically. Now, what about this massive bucket here, this other bucket? Well, that had me a little bit concerned because I thought maybe I might be missing the mark completely. So I went through and actually analyzed those open-ended responses. You won't see it here because I've taken it out of this spreadsheet. But if you go here, you would see it in this column here. So where it says something completely different, which of the following best describes you? And you'll notice that people say business owner, and we provide services, and we have affiliate business and lead generation business. I won't go through all of them, but for the most part, people who said other were a combination of business owner and consultant. Now, I'm still, just so you can understand my own thinking, and you can appreciate that you don't always have the answers right away. This is still a topic that I'm considering in my mind when it comes to building out the bucket survey, the one that starts with the video and then goes through the close-ended questions to send people in one of several directions. I have not decided if I'm going to be creating a bucket for business owners who predominantly sell their own product, consultants, and people who say that they're both, or if I'm going to force people to choose one of those two buckets. I have not decided that yet. I'm leaning one way, but I'm reserving a few more days to think that one through. As far as the size of the business, no surprises here. You know, almost, what is this? Almost 90%, 85% of people have businesses under 500,000, which is pretty much what I expected. And this, you can see kind of the split as it gets, as businesses get bigger. Where that's going to come into play is this segment of my market is basically, these are info product buyers 100%. So these are people that are not in a position to hire my implementation services. People in this position here are on the fringe, but are more likely to be in a position to hire me on a consulting basis. And then the other 15% here, which is actually I'm pretty happy with, is in a position to hire my high-end full implementation consulting services, which is good. So I'll be able to basically funnel roughly 70% of people into my info product, another 20% of people probably into my coaching practice with the info product as the downsell, and then another 15% of people that I will be selling into a process for getting them to raise their hand and apply to become an implementation client. So that's kind of my early level thinking on these overall numbers. Now, the next part of the analysis process that I go through, and I'm going to see how to do this. All right, I'm going to walk you through basically what I do. So this is the most important part of this whole exercise, and I know we're at the hour mark right now. I want to spend about 5 more minutes going through this process. This is really the last big thing that I wanted to teach today, and then I'm going to reserve the next 30 minutes to go through any questions that people have and cover anything that people either aren't clear about or that they want explained in a little bit more detail. So basically what I'm looking for, you can't see this, you can't read this text, that's not important. What I'm looking for is I'm mining these open-ended responses for gold. Literally mining these responses for gold. Now, what am I using these responses for? I'm using these responses to identify what people's hot buttons are, what their objections are, what their biggest challenges are, the context around their demographic information. Most specifically, I'm using these open-ended questions to figure out what end buckets I'm going to be sending people into. And the way I do that is like this. I'll read through the response, and I'll give you an example of this in a moment. And what I'm looking for is how can I categorize this response? So you notice here that I've got cat 1, 2, 3. So basically what I'm doing is I will look at a response and I will pick a maximum of 3 categories that the response falls under. So in this case, I'm going through it. I won't read the whole response because this one's kind of long. But basically, this gentleman is, and he might be on the call. I've removed people's URLs and their personal name and information. And when I send the template, I'll be removing the open-ended responses just to preserve people's privacy. But this gentleman runs the marketing for a car loan sort of lead generation business online and in Australia, and is wondering basically how to make PPC traffic work, how to make it convert in a competitive, high-cost environment. And basically the categories that I came up with his response were he wanted specifically to know how to apply my techniques to PPC, so basically getting PPC traffic to convert, so I've called that PPC conversion. He wanted to know how to apply my techniques to sell non-information products. He talked about how a lot of the funnel training online talks about selling info products and coaching services and things of that nature, but wasn't sure how to apply it to his business. And then thirdly, he wanted to know how to apply his techniques to an offline sales process, because in his business he's not able to transact directly online. He has to take the process to over the phone, and it just has to do with regulatory issues around making quotes for car loans online. Fine. That's the first one. So then my process is basically to go through that, focused first and foremost, most importantly, on the top 20%, the hyper-responsives. And then because I don't have a ton of data here, I only have about 112 responses, which is kind of light. They're great responses and they're very detailed, but I only have 112. I want to go to the next top 20 after that. Depending on the market that I might run this in, if I'm entering a new market that I've never been in before, I like to have ideally a minimum of 500 responses and ideally at least 1,000 responses, because that helps you to see trends that you otherwise might not. So what I'm going through here is I'm coming up with the categories, and it would be very tedious to watch me do this in real time because it's extremely boring to watch someone else do it. But I'm just going to kind of walk you through what I do. So I come up with the categories, and I'm coming up with new categories, and I'm going through. And this one here as a perfect example. So the first time that I came up with this category for this one, my biggest problem is reliance on Google AdWords. I won't read the whole thing, but that's basically the gist of it. Relying on Google AdWords because struggling to make that traffic convert is a concern of his. So I mean, I think initially I had titled this category Google AdWords or something like that. But what happens is the name of the game here is not to come up with an infinite number of categories. The name of the game is to constantly niche your categories up. So if you have categories that you're like, oh, these are kind of similar to one another, you want to use the same naming convention. You want to combine them into a single category. So these were very similar, Google AdWords and PPC conversion. So I changed the name to PPC conversion. And you'll see me do that throughout this process here. So like this one here, originally it started as fix broken funnel because this guy had a broken funnel. The one below it was optimize underperforming funnel. Those are kind of similar things that they needed help with. So I want to create a new category that basically encapsulates both of their answers. And the reason why you want to do that is because at the end of this all, what you want to do is add up all your categories. And I want to continue going through this process through the next week before I come up with my buckets, which is what we're going to talk about in next week's call. But this is the process that you use to figure out what ultimate buckets am I going to send people into. Now, right now, based on the data that I have, I think I know at least two of the buckets. One of the buckets is getting cold traffic to convert, because I have a lot of people that are talking about PPC conversion, which is cold traffic, a form of cold traffic, PPC conversion, PPC compliance, cold traffic conversion. I have a lot of people who are in that particular situation. And I have another category of people who are in the situation where they have multiple submarkets, many products, multiple submarkets, multiple submarkets, multiple submarkets. These are basically people who were in the same situation that I was in with Rocket Memory, where they have, a bunch of different products, maybe several different products, but most importantly, they have different consumers, different customers in the same market that they need to speak to differently, that have different sets of concerns, slightly different languaging that needs to be used to each one. And so in my business, that I know is a problem. I know that's a problem for my customers. So when I'm funneling my prospects into one of several video sales letters, I'm going to be having one variation that speaks specifically about that situation, because I know it's a big pain point that's coming up over and over again for a certain segment of my market. So basically, the next steps that I'm going to be going through is doing the coming up with the categories for all the way through these next 23 or so, or 22. I'm going to add up all the categories. I'm going to prioritize the categories based on which ones come up most frequently. And then what I'm going to be looking for is looking for categories that do not have a tendency to overlap with one another. Okay? If categories overlap with one another, if there's 100% overlap, like for example, if, and this is an if, this is not true, but if there was a 100% overlap with between technical concerns and multiple submarkets. Technical concerns, by the way, is the name that I gave for people who are technically concerned, are concerned about the technical implementation of the strategy. So technical concerns, if there's 100% overlap between technical concerns and multiple submarkets, that would be a single bucket. Does that make sense? So there would not be two separate buckets, even though those are two different things, because you see them in combination every single time. It's sort of like a, in cats, for example, like there are certain recessive genes where if a cat has, for example, if a cat is an orange tabby, 99% of the time it's going to be a male, because there's something about the way I don't understand it, but basically there's something about the male chromosome or whatever carries the genetic variant of being orange tabby. So 9 times out of 10, if you see an orange cat, it's going to be a male. So that would be one bucket. I wouldn't have a separate bucket for males and tabbies because or orange cats because they're 100% overlap. Well, same thing in this case. What you're looking for is where the biggest differences exist. Where's the biggest non-overlap? There are ways that you can do that technically, but for the purposes of this discussion and for the most part, unless you're doing this for a $100 million pharmaceutical company where splitting hairs is going to really make a difference, you can generally see with your own eyes what that overlap is and what it isn't. And a lot of times it's very intuitive. It's what you'd expect. So I'm looking for where there's as little overlap as possible to help me determine what the buckets are. We're going to talk about that process in more detail next week, but I just wanted to give you sort of tee it up, kind of what's going to be coming around the corner. Now, before we get to Q&A, I just want to kind of summarize as far as if you want to implement this in real time, what your next steps should be. So if you have an existing list, your next steps are to write the email that goes out to your list that sends people to take the survey. The next step is to set up the survey either in Survey Gizmo or in using Google Drive. The next step after that is to capture the data, to download that data, and to run the analysis that I just walked through, where you are determining what the sub-buckets are, you're determining what % of your market is made up of the various demographic elements that are of interest to you, and that's going to vary from market to market. It might be gender, it might be age, because it's important to understand that context. You're going to identify the hyper-responsives in your market by doing the whole length formula and the multiplication thing and identifying the score, and then you're going to go through the process that I walked through 5 minutes ago around coming up with the categories. If you do not have an existing list, your process is a little bit more involved, but you basically follow the same path. Instead, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be setting up a simple site. The site should have a landing page, two-step opt-in process whereby people are first directed to a landing page like the example that I gave you, and feel free to copy or use that template, which then directs people to a form. The form is designed to find out about who they are. The incentive for filling out the form is some sort of ethical bribe that basically is geared towards answering their question. So it could be in the form of in my case, it was a free memory improvement kit. It could be, if they're looking for help losing weight, it could be a free weight loss quick start guide, something along those lines. And then you're going to analyze the data that way. That's the bare bones way to get this off the ground immediately. There's obviously many different ways that you can do that, but I want to give people the easiest, simplest way to do that. As far as sending traffic to one of those pages, I typically will send pay-per-click traffic. In order to do that, you need to build out a slightly more substantial site with some additional articles, with a page that has privacy policy, terms and conditions page, a contact page. It's a little bit more involved to build out a microsite that is Google and Bing compliant. There's less restrictions if you want to do this through Facebook traffic, where you could set this up as a form either within a Facebook application or setting up a simple little site that you're sending Facebook traffic to. This is beyond talking about how to set up a page like that and getting it coded and getting it designed. There are a number of resources out there that will teach you how to set up a website, and it's really beyond the scope of this course. But I just want to give people the framework for gathering the information necessary to do the sort of deep dive survey analysis that we've been talking about. So, Ian, I'm just going to take a sip of water right now, and then why don't we go to Q&A with the rest of the time that we have.
All right, sounds good. Do you want me to Skype you the latest questions, or you just want me to read through them?
Let's go through the ones that have been why don't we do this? I will start reading through the questions, but in the meantime, if you've been seeing like recurring questions that have come up over and over again, it'll be a little bit more difficult for me to pick up on what those might be. But if like the same questions have been coming up over and over again, then let's start with those first.
I think most of them are pretty unique to each person's situation.
Okay, let me go through. So if I scroll down to the bottom, those are the earliest questions, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's go through. Okay. I'm starting at the bottom. I'm just scrolling. Some of these we've already covered. Okay. Okay. Tested the funnel with online marketing sources. The short answer is predominantly the traffic that I send is through online sources. What tools to use for autoresponder, list management, etc. Yes, we're going to talk about that. We'll talk about that when we cover. Let's see, not getting any audio. I think everybody else is getting audio. Okay, cool. Love the spontaneous nature of this new funnel. It's unfolding right before my eyes. I'm very excited as well. Let's see. Okay, you'll get a copy of all the resources, the recording. Okay, do you only give a discount on the product to people who fill out the survey? Yes, typically. Very simple process. You can just add people to a specific form that sends people to a specific list, and then you can, when your product is finally ready to release, then you can offer them that discount. Okay. Doing this service like hunting guide, what incentives would you suggest? Well, if this was a hunting guide, I won't be able to go through every example like this, but I would probably offer some sort of tip sheet. 10 secrets to finding, and I'm not a hunter, so I'm going to use lingo that's just like completely wrong. But 10 ways to track your target faster. 10 tips to track your target faster in in the upcoming hunting season, something like that. That would be the free thing, and then you would ask for the information in exchange. Let's see. Okay. Okay. Why have all the questions on one form instead of asking the questions one by one? All the questions are typically asked one by one, unless we're sending it to a landing page example. Okay, some of this we talked about. Okay, zoom in. SurveyMonkey. Okay, we've covered most of this stuff. Okay. Okay, what about questions to ask over the phone? Really good question. So now you have these people's their phone information, and this is where you can get a lot of gold. You will want to get on the phone with people. Most people who do business online, it's something that they're uncomfortable with. Not most, but some people. So I noticed in the clients that I work with, this is one of the areas where there's the biggest reluctance to do this. It is worth so much to get on the phone with people to find out about their situation. So the questions that you ask are very simple. Basically what I do is it's a game of shut the hell up and let them talk. And I even go to the extent of I will write down on a piece of paper in front of me in black Sharpie marker in all caps in huge writing, shut the hell up and let them talk. When you get on the phone, basically what you want to do is go through a little bit of small talk to, make people comfortable with you. And then afterward, you basically want to say, hey, so, thanks so much for getting on the phone with me. Real quick, I was looking over your response the other day, and the other day, what you were talking about was blah, 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 blah. You want to paraphrase what they said. And this is what you want to say. You want to say, tell me a little bit about that. And then you want to shut up. And basically what you want to do is you want them to talk. You want them to talk, 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 talk. And you basically want to continue probing and getting them to talk more deeply about that. So you want to ask things like, tell me a little bit more about that. Or, that's interesting. What do you mean by that exactly? Once you've exhausted that path as much as possible, if you ask the context question, what was the reason why you searched for this information today, you want to ask them for that. You want to ask them information about if you're fishing for coming up with new product ideas or a new hook or an angle. You want to ask them questions like, well, tell me some of the things that you've tried in the past. This is where you find out the things that they've tried that have failed, and this is when in your marketing you can talk about things like, this is a strategy that'll work for you even if you've tried this and this and this and this. That's how you find out what those things are and what those things that you should mention. You also want to ask people about, I like to ask people the wave the magic wand question. Let's pretend for a moment you could wave the magic wand and you could wake up tomorrow and you could have whatever solution, the perfect solution in your mind. What might that look like? That's another piece of advice, is when you're doing these phone interviews, you always want to use the language, what might that be? Using the word might instead of would. And the reason why, this is like a very advanced sort of psychological tactic, but the reason why you do that is when you say, what would that be, it implies that there's a right answer. And therefore it implies that there's a wrong answer. And when you do that, you shut people's minds off to the different possibilities that could be there. So you always want to use things like, if there was a reason why the other solutions that you've tried in the past didn't work, what might be that reason? And it opens up their minds to the fact that there's not a right answer here, but there are possibilities of what the right answer might be. And so you're going to get a much more open, more honest response if you do that than if you use the would language. Okay. Just talked about the phone. Let's see. Let's do the brain stuff, not the basic how-to. Okay. Okay. All right. Let's see. There'll be a template of questions you ask in the surveys and the reasons for them. Yes, like we talked about, you'll get the survey. What's the average percent of people? Okay, that's a good question. Average percentage of people who take the survey. It's going to vary. It's going to vary based on how recent your list is, how active you are, how often you write to them. In my case here, I think, again, like I said, we got roughly about a 10% response rate. That's decent. You might get a 5% response rate. You might get a 50% response rate. It really varies all over the map. What you're looking for is you're analyzing for hot buttons. If you ask for a survey on a topic and nobody responds to it, that's an indication that you might want to nix the project altogether. So if I asked this survey and I said, what would you like me to write about, which is really kind of a disguised way of how can I sell you what I have to offer in a way that doesn't exactly say that. I'm genuinely interested in what people want to know, but at the same time, I really want to know what it will take for them to buy my products and services. So if you write a survey and nobody takes it, that's an indication that you might want to just nix that topic altogether. Now, if you get people to take the survey, but all the responses are really, really low in terms of the response quality, you're only getting 1- and 2-word answers. Like if all my answers were like these ones down here, hang on a second. Too much conflicting advice, how to write copy like you, technical setup of funnels, I need conversion sequence, selecting a market and a niche within that, want to get high-ticket coaching clients, build a responsive and targeted list. None of these responses are very indicative of a buyer profile. They're very short. There's no meat around them. If all my responses were like that, I might think that I have a problem. The other thing to look for is what percentage of people are willing to get on the phone with you. Again, my case is abnormally high. 70% is like crazy. And it has to do with my positioning. The fact that I'm a high-paid marketing consultant and I'm very inaccessible, people will do anything to get on the phone with me for free. So that's just a positioning thing, more of an artifact of that than people's sort of desire on the topic. Let's see, tag methodology or nomenclature which you use in Infusionsoft, please. Have to be more specific on that. I'm not exactly sure, but basically you want to name your I'm not exactly sure in this context what that means. Email to send out surveys, which gets anywhere from 15 to 30% response, plain and simple, down to the point. Yep, that's very typical. I usually add a discount or whatever, unlike what Ryan suggests. Discount is fine as long as it's for the product that you are going to be potentially selling, because that is just an indication that they want the thing you're going to sell in the first place. Good. Phone number valuable. Changing up a survey. Are you going to explain how to export data into your template? Maybe I missed that. The template, you don't really export the data into the template. This is just going to show you how to format the data. So, if you go here, and I don't need to show this how-to, but basically, the process that I went through to create this template is, you bold the top row. There's a bunch of little things that I've kind of done for you. You bold the top row. You make the top pane. What the hell is it here? Layout. I hate the new version of Excel. Freeze the top row. Freeze top row. So that way you can scroll. Hide all these columns that are not really useful. Hide. Single biggest marketing challenge. I just shorthanded the single most important question. Which of the following best describes you? And I just call this like day full, which is something type. I'm just changing all these names to make them easier. I'm also doing a find replace. Some of this stuff won't apply to your survey, but I'm doing like a find replace on some of the stuff. So this one here that says something completely different, that was like a long response. I didn't like the way that it showed up, just for ease of organization. So I did a control find replace to other, replace all. So all this stuff is sort of like just organizing the data, so it's a little bit easier to work with. It's kind of basic Excel stuff that I wasn't planning on going over in detail. If there's an overwhelming number of people who say, yes, Ryan, I want you to show me how to do this Excel formatting stuff, in the comment box, say, yes, I want you to show me the Excel formatting, or just write Excel formatting, yes, please, something like that. Ian, take note. If there are enough people, then maybe we'll do a brief sort of recording of a side session. It won't be live, but it'll just be a brief recording, and we'll put that in the members area to show people how to do some of this stuff. But it wasn't something I was planning on explaining in step-by-step detail. Let's see. Can we get detailed instructions on Excel? Okay. Someone's asking for it right there. Here's a subject I use, and yeah, really use your help. That's a great subject line. As long as we have your format, should be good. Thanks for not killing us on the how-to. Is there a Facebook group for us to join? Not as of yet. This is good for B2B, but will this work if we sell B2C self-grow products like tapes or webinars? Yep, I use it for B2C all day, every day. So lucky, taught Excel. I could imagine that's what you do, tailor the top 20%. Yep. So you basically want to focus. This is a good point. I didn't touch on this point in as much detail as I probably should have, but you really want to focus on that top 20%. The top 20% of your market is, in terms of the hyper-response based on response quality, those are the buyers. And what's interesting is if you do the analysis of all people, everybody from the top hyper-responsive to the least hyper-responsive people, what you're going to see is that there will be differences. There will be differences between the two. You'll find that there are some frequently asked questions that come up over and over again among the people at the bottom, but just because they come up over and over again doesn't mean that those are things that people will pay money to get their answers to. Because a lot of the times, frequently asked questions are also the most frequently answered questions, i.e. they're things that people can find when they search on Google very easily for free. They're not things that they're going to pay money to get access to, even though they're asking them. Let's see. Let's let's see, can I do search people who've already purchased a product in order to determine how to find perfect prospects that haven't yet purchased from cold traffic? Yes, it's not really the purpose of the deep dive work, but later on we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. Is there an optimal number of buckets to reduce responses into? That's actually a really good question. So what you're going to find is that you're going to go through, if you go through this process this week, you're going to say, holy crap, I've got like 17 buckets. Where do I go from here? Because I obviously can't funnel people into 17 buckets. What you want to do is funnel that ideally to between 3 and 5 major buckets. And if you can't funnel everybody into 3 to 5 major buckets, then you want to focus on the 80-20. You want to be able to get 80% of your market in 3 to 5 buckets. And you might have 5 buckets where 80% of the people fall into one of those buckets, and you might have 15 other buckets where the other 20% fall into. And that's very typical. Everything that we do is focused on the 80-20, the biggest bang for your buck. You don't worry about the people who are in that 20% because oftentimes, and this is basically true across every situation I've personally been involved with, it's not worth the time and energy. You're better off catering to the 80% and doing the whole 80-20 thing than worrying about that 20% that would require having 15 other buckets. What you do in that case is someone who falls into one of the other 15 buckets, you try to match them into one of your 5 buckets, which is going to be kind of like your catch-all bucket where the majority of people fall into. Let's see. You sell a survey and survey at the same time who does not have an existing list. Sure. I mean, you can basically run people through an open-ended survey like I showed you in the total memory improvement example, and on the back end of that, you could definitely sell a product as the thank you page. You could definitely do that. In fact, that's something that I'm doing in at least 2 or 3 other markets that I can think of with clients. I can't disclose the pages for client privacy purposes, but I can tell you that we're doing that exact same thing. We're capturing a little bit of information on the front end. And with that information, the open-ended information, in addition to that, we're sending people to a sales page afterwards. In PPC taboo market like poker education, I mean, you're going to have to find alternative traffic sources for that. Have you ever integrated phone sales calls into your funnel? The answer is yes. We'll talk about that later. Is it good to decide my avatar is man or woman? Definitely. If you're not sure about that, that's definitely one of the questions that I would ask. Questions asked on the phone, covered that. Process for calling people who leave their phone number, talked about that. Predominantly female. Okay, this is a long question. Prospect list of about 12,000, sell leather books and bags. What are some examples of survey questions I might ask? Just get me thinking on the right track, and what could I offer them other than a discount on the next purchase? Not that a discount is bad, just looking for other ideas. I mean, what I would do if I sold a physical goods product, had a physical goods website or business, and I do this all the time, is the excuse is we're thinking about releasing a couple different products, but and you can make this fun depending on how fun you want to make your marketing, but I'll do stuff like this all the time. My business partner and I are in a fight right now, and I need you to help me out. I need you to help us settle a dispute. My business partner thinks that we should be producing blah, blah, blah. On the other hand, I think we should be focusing on this. And we don't have time to do both, so we have to do one or the other. We've tried to, go heads or tails. We've tried to duke it out, and for the life of us, we can't figure it out. And it's gotten to the point that we're going to go separate ways because we just can't agree on the damn thing. So that's where I need your help. My business is hanging in the balance, and I need your help to rectify my relationship with my business partner. Will you do me a favor and just click on the link and tell me which of the following are you most interested in? And I would do that for a physical goods product. If you were thinking a physical goods site, if you're thinking about selling different physical goods, you would ask them which one they like, A or B or C or A, B, C, or D, something along those lines. And then you would also ask an open-ended question to gauge how likely they are to spend money on that thing. You would say things like, tell me, if we were to customize this, what would you like to see? What features would you like to see on the product? And if they say something like, high quality, not a good response. If they say something like, for example, if you're selling leather goods, if they say, oh, I'd really love it if there were some leather tassels on the bottom and some sequencings and maybe some rhinestones on the outside. And in fact, if it was like blue rhinestones on a dark brown leather, that's exactly what I'm looking for, blah, blah, blah. Well, that prospect, if you give them what they're looking for, they're going to buy. They're going to buy. So what you're looking for is not only which of the responses generated more yes, no's, if you give them an A or B, but then you want to analyze the A's and B's, and you want to see which one generated more hyper-responsive responses. Let's see, I fell off a bit about how you decided categories for choices in number 3 and 4. You did profession and revenue, but how would that work for weight loss? Weight loss, you would ask people, these are just examples, but you could ask people their weight, you could ask people their age, you could ask people their gender, you could ask people what weight loss techniques have they tried in the past. You could ask what diets are they on, if any, right now. You could ask whether they exercise or not. You could ask what type of exercise programs that they participate in. There are a number of different things that you can ask to kind of get some context around who they are. Okay, yes, recording. Do I record the phone calls? It's a good question. This is something that you're going to just want to do the research in. There's something that's called a two-party and single-party. I forget the technical term for it. It's just escaping me at the moment. But certain states are one-party approval, and other states are two-party approval. What that means is two-party approval, and approval is not the right word. Someone, I'm sure, will put it in the chat. I just can't think of what it is at the moment. But certain states require both parties to know that the call is being recorded. And if that's the case, if you want to play it safe, then if you want to play by the rules in the United States, you technically need to announce that the call will be recorded. One way to get around this that I found that's really straightforward is you set up a conference line, and then you have the conference line with a like a computer person, or like the recorded message on it. Just have a setup that says, welcome to the toll-free conference. All calls are all calls are recorded for quality assurance purposes. Your call will start in a moment. It kind of like you've covered the bases because you've told the person that it's going to be recorded, but you haven't made a big deal about it on the call. So I'll typically do something like that. And there are a number of different technologies and ways to do that. If you want to go low tech and you don't know exactly how to set that up, you can just flat out say, hey, would you be okay if I just recorded this call? It's just for my own internal purposes. The reason why is I want to ask you questions, and then after I get off the call, I like to listen back to it again, just so I can kind of take some notes on what you said. That way I don't have to be writing down when you're giving your responses. Would that be okay? And most people will say yes. And you say it's for internal purposes only, etc. Okay. Let's see. Sample of the phone calls. I got to see if I can dig some up, because I wouldn't be able to do client work. It would have to be some of my old stuff. Possibly. If my list is tough to get a sample size 100, what do you suggest? I mean, do what you can. My list is 1,000 people that I sent this out to, and are about 1,300 maybe recent active subscribers, and a few different buckets, and I got 118 responses. So I would start there, and if not, then you can go to the cold traffic technique. Free content on YouTube to generate traffic that allows us to track paying sponsors. We also create information. I'm looking for ideas on how to separate the freebie seekers in our initial deep dive survey. We have our own list. Such a good question. We can ask, we'll tactically shortlist these freebie customers to the bottom of the list. I mean, I would position the survey as, we're thinking about putting together some paid training programs, and I typically like to, and I'll use this language as well, because I have the same concerns in the markets that I work with, is you want to separate the freebie seekers out from the potential paying clients. So how do you do that? It's how you position the survey, and you can position it as, we're thinking about releasing some paid, a lot of folks have been asking us about XYZ topics, and because it's such a hot topic, we're thinking about releasing some paid training programs, some affordable paid training programs to go into these topics in detail. If it's something that you're interested, because we haven't yet finalized the content that we'll be covering in these programs, if you take a moment to click on the link below and tell me what you'd like to learn in these paid training programs. Not only will I bet, like I mentioned, kind of my script that I talked about earlier in the call. Not only will I not only will I gear the training to your questions, concerns, and topics that you're most interested in, as a way of saying thank you, I'll also give you a discount. And so what you're doing is you're naturally screening for the people who know that it's going to be a paid product, and the freebie seekers just aren't going to answer at all. So that's how I would handle that one. What autoresponder do you recommend? Kind of depends on the situation. We can talk about that when we talk about email. Let's see. Okay, a lot of people want the Excel formatting. Okay, great resource, Yulia. Thank you. Okay, looks like I'll have to show the process of formatting the data. So Stan asked the question, when entering a new market, have you tried doing a survey through a JV partner? Email to their list for a fee. Might the survey answers be biased? No matter what source you are surveying, yes, it's going to be biased. The short answer is you want to survey the same traffic source that you're going to be selling the damn product. If you're going to be selling the product to your existing list, you survey your existing list. If you're going to be selling the product to cold traffic, then you're going to be selling to cold traffic. Now here's the kicker. If your existing list was generated via cold traffic, you can use your existing list to run the survey and then sell that product on cold traffic. Why? Because the source of those prospects and customers is the same as the source that you're going to be running the advertising. Okay. The other thing that you want to do is this. If you're running a list to your internal survey to your internal list, you want to separate your prospects, your non-buyers, people who have not bought, from your buyers. And the reason why you want to do that is because you want to value and weigh what your buyers say so much higher, probably 10x higher than what your non-buyers say. It's important to value what the non-buyers say because some of the times the reasons why the people haven't bought is because you haven't met their needs. So that's one reason to pay attention to what they have to say. But if you're thinking about just purely what else can I sell my list, what else can I sell my to my market, you want to weigh the customers much more heavily than the non-buyers. I'm going to just spend about 10 more minutes because I've got a call in 20 minutes that I have to run to, and I'll need to take a quick break in between to prep for that call and get some water. So I'm going to just burn through these last set of questions. You're using the same basic set of questions just about every market. For the most part, with some tailoring, obviously, again, like we talked about with weight loss, you would ask questions that are relevant to weight loss. You wouldn't ask how much money do you make. That's not really relevant. Okay, do you bucket people based on just their problem or consider the demographics as well? Combination. So I'll tell you what I'm planning on, and you're going to hear my lawn guy cutting my lawn. He's driving by the window of my office right now, so I apologize for that. But the long and short of it is what I'm intending on doing for this particular funnel, and every single one's different, there's some variations on it, is I'm thinking about targeting the problem at the beginning of the video sales letter or the beginning of the sales letter that's based on the bucket that they fall into. That problem that I target, maybe there'll be 3 main problems, maybe there'll be 5 main problems. I haven't decided yet. I'm going to put those at the top of my sales message. Then when I transition from here's the problem and now here's the solution I'm thinking about customizing based on their business revenue size and business type. So if someone is a consultant or someone's making less than $100,000 a year, I'm not going to be pitching them on a coaching program or my done-for-you services. I'm going to be pitching them on my information product. So there's almost like, if you think about it, there's like 2 parts to every sales message. There's part 1, which is the problem, and part 2 is the product. So I might be using things a little bit sort of interchangeably, and we'll get into that in a little bit more detail down the road. Thank you, Dion. Consent, first-party consent, second, two-party consent. That's the word I was looking for. Sometimes I don't even know how I wake up in the morning. Okay, love the marketing psychology. Cool, we can talk more about that. Yeah, I mean, after this call, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send out a survey. No surprises there. I want to just get feedback on go more detail into the nuts and bolts, go more detail into the psychology, because we can really take two different directions. We only have a limited amount of time to cover everything. So, folks that are going to be sticking around for the additional masterminding beyond the initial 6 weeks will have plenty of time to go into all these topics in more detail. What I really want to do is give people enough information that they can get started with this. I'm literally trying to cram, 10 years of knowledge into like 10 hours of training, which is impossible. So I'm trying to give you the 80-20, the biggest bang for your buck. Okay, let's see. All right, tire kickers. You talked about House of Cards. What point are you getting info that specific? That's later on. That's in the follow-up sequence that I'd be talking about that stuff. Let's see. Someone just got the call recording late. We sent it out 4 times, same email. So I know some people got the email 4 times, and some people just got it at the end. And this looks like we got through all the questions. So awesome. I know this went a little bit 15 minutes longer than I planned on it. I appreciate everybody who stuck around. If the training was helpful, give me a virtual high five or fist pump in the comment section. Give me a hell yeah, this was awesome. Just to boost my self-esteem. And like I said, we'll be following up with an email with just a quick little survey just to kind of get a feel for if the training's at the right level, if I should go more advanced, more basic on certain things. We're going to be following up with, in that email, there will be a link with a password to the members area, which we are actually creating on the fly. It's not going to be anything fancy. It's really going to be an internal site that I'm going to be using, and I'm going to give you guys access to it. And that is going to have this recording of the presentation, all the templates and assets that we talked about, and I will talk with Ian about possibly doing some additional sort of video screen flow on the Excel stuff, on how to do that. And that training will not be ready until next week if we're able to do it. So I just want to give people a heads up on that. And I think that just about covers it. Ian, is there anything else that I'm missing that I should have talked about, or are we good to go?
Getting a lot of virtual fist pumps out there, so looks like people are
awesome. Love the virtual fist pump.
Yep.
Awesome. All right, guys. Great talking. Next week, Ian, the call is going to be on Thursday next week, right? Because it's Good Friday, I think.
All right.
Yeah, so it'll be Thursday afternoon at 1:30 Central, 2:30 Eastern, and 11:30 Pacific. It's the only call that's going to be at a different time. That's on April 17th on Thursday. After next week, we go back to the Friday schedule. I think that's it for today. Talk to you guys later, and have a great weekend.